House will be in order. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is on the question of suspending the rules and passing H.R. 2478 as amended. Clerk will report the title.
Union Calendar Number 313, H.R. 2478, a bill to amend the Investment Company Act of 1940 to postpone the date of payment or satisfaction upon redemption of certain securities in the case of the financial exploitation of specified adults and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? So many are as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and the nays.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will arise. Sufficient number having arisen. The yeas and nays are now ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. Yeas are 414, the nays are 2. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet on Monday. Again, next, when it shall convene at noon for morning hour debate at 2 p.m. for legislative business.
Without objection.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I hereby remove my name as co-sponsor of H Resolution 1110.
Gentleman's request is accepted.
Easy enough. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I hereby remove my name as co-sponsor of H.R. 2555.
Gentleman's request is accepted.
House will be in order. Please take their conversations off the floor. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania? Yes, does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks. And the House is not in order.
The House will be in order. Members will take their conversations off the floor. The House will be in order. Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the bicentennial of the Rogers family farm in Menard County, Illinois. Founded in 1826, this farm is still operated by the Rogers family, making 7 generations of stewardship. This family heritage includes Samuel Rogers, who serves on my staff as counsel for the House Agriculture Committee. The Rogers family settled around New Salem, Illinois, the community that helped shape President Abraham Lincoln's early life. The family's founding patriarch cast his votes for Lincoln, and in one extraordinary surviving affidavit, Lincoln himself signed Samuel David's name, an enduring testament to the civic trust that bound citizens together. Frontier families like the Rogers didn't just build farms, they built schools, townships, church communities, and civic networks that helped form the ground for Lincoln's political identity and the principles of the modern Republican Party. That same spirit lives on today in their descendants, including Samuel and his brother Benjamin, a current University of Illinois veterinary medical student. Mr. Speaker, today we honor the Rogers family and through them the enduring strength of the American community. Congratulations on this milestone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of Alan Paul, a gifted journalist, author, and storyteller whose work helped preserve and illuminate the history of North Carolina. Alan dedicated his career to telling important stories with depth, accuracy, and humanity. Written alongside with his son Mac Paul, one of his final works, Miracle Road, the story of Research Triangle Park, captures one of the greatest economic transformations in American history. The rise of Research Triangle Park from a landscape once described as possums and pines into a global center of innovation, research, and opportunity. The book chronicles the visionaries, scientists, business leaders, and community advocates who helped build the Triangle into what it is today. Through meticulous research and compelling storytelling, Allen preserved the history that shaped North Carolina's future. His contributions will continue to educate and inspire generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today to thank the members of the Allentown Fire Department, as well as the professional and volunteer firefighters from throughout the Lehigh Valley who responded to last night's devastating fire in Allentown. Under extreme circumstances, the firefighters and first responders on the scene of the Front Street fire successfully extinguished the flames, saved many neighboring properties, and most importantly, kept every local resident safe. We also understand that one firefighter was injured during the blaze, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Last week, I had the opportunity to participate in a ride-along with the firefighters from AFD Engine Company 6, based just a few blocks away from the site of the fire. Throughout the process, I got to see their professionalism and commitment up close. We are so grateful and fortunate to have these first responders working every day and looking after our community. On behalf of the people of the Lehigh Valley and the Poconos, thank you for your service. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Virginia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate Vitiligo Day, raising awareness for the 3.7 million Americans living with the autoimmune condition that causes discoloration of the skin. Like Erica, one of my constituents who sought a way to treat her vitiligo symptoms throughout her childhood. And even though the FDA first approved a repigment treatment for vitiligo in 2020, access to treatments remain financially out of reach for constituents like Erica due to Virginia's classification of vitiligo as a cosmetic condition rather than what it actually is, an autoimmune disease. And absent treatment, vitiligo patients face significant mental health burdens and stigma that contribute to the worsening health and less productivity. And while Medicare covers vitiligo treatment, Medicaid coverage varies state by state. Because Virginia classifies vitiligo as a cosmetic condition, Medicaid won't cover the treatment in our Commonwealth. And I urge today the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to certify vitiligo is a non-cosmetic autoimmune condition so that Medicaid recipients with this condition can access the life-changing treatments. No matter where you live, you should be able to get the treatment you need when you need it. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I have introduced an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act addressing the massive Janet Mello fraud scandal at Fort Sam Houston and the broader pattern of abuse it has exposed. This amendment simply requires a public comprehensive report on how more than $100 million meant for the 4-H Military Partnership Grant Program was stolen over several years. What red flags were missed, and what reforms will prevent this from ever happening again? It has already passed the House twice, most recently by a vote of 430 to 3, only to be stripped out by the Senate in their infinite wisdom, for reasons known only to the Almighty. Meanwhile, yet another Fort Sam Houston official has been charged with stealing over $500,000 from Army family programs. I urge the Rules Committee to make my amendment in order for the third year, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Happy summer. It's time to fire up the grill, fire up the air conditioner, book some road trips if you can afford to fuel them. Because since Donald Trump's election, gasoline prices have skyrocketed, household energy bills are up by as much as 18%, and in response to this, the president said, quote, "I don't think about America's financial situation." Now, that is more than just a psychotic lack of empathy, because he also said, when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. Who is we in this situation? In the words of Chris Rock, it ain't us. But it's par for the course in a White House that has always put the interests of oil and gas producers ahead of consumers. So I've got this crazy idea. What if we actually put forth an energy policy that unambiguously put consumers first, that always prioritized the most reliable, lowest cost sources of energy, even if that came at the expense of oil company profits? That is exactly what Congressman Levin and I have put forward in our Energy Bills Relief Act, which is up to 158 co-sponsors in this House, because your bills are too high, our bills are too high, and it is long past time for us to do something about it. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address House for 1 minute, revising send my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Carolina Hurricanes on bringing the Stanley Cup back home to North Carolina. On June 14th, there was a storm surge for the ages. After 20 years, our guys once again showed the hockey world what hard work, pure grit, and teamwork are able to accomplish. Led by head coach Rod Brindamore, who captained the Hurricanes' first championship team in 2006, this group of guys put together one of the most dominant playoff runs in recent memory. From Jordan Stahl to Sebastian Aho to every player, coach, trainer, and member of the organization, this championship belongs to all of them. But it also belongs to the Caniacs, to the fans who packed the Lenovo Center, who waved their towels, and who stood behind this team through all the highs and the lows. This victory is yours too. Mr. Speaker, the Hurricanes represent more than just a hockey team. Through their support of children and families of our service members and first responders, they have become part of the communities across North Carolina. Congratulations to the 2026 Stanley Cup champion Carolina Hurricanes and to Caniacs everywhere. Let us sound the siren and celebrate hoisting the cup. With that, Mr. Speaker, go Canes. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Puerto Rico seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized without objection for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Puerto Rico faces a water crisis, and ironically, the governor's office is drowning. Last week, decades of mismanagement and poor maintenance left hundreds of thousands, including me and my family, without water. There was a stench, but it was not just the stench of unflushed toilets, it was the stench of corruption. The former Secretary of Economic Development filed a criminal complaint against the governor's chief of staff for alleged intervention in a government bidding process. When the governor testified in the Senate last week, Senator Mike Lee asked her, "How can Congress be assured that federal funds sent to Puerto Rico are not being misused?" Senator Lee, the people of Puerto Rico share your concern. On behalf of the honest, hardworking majority of Puerto Ricans, I tell this chamber, we will not be quiet, we will not stand still, we will fight to restore integrity in public service in the great Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I rise to recognize an individual who is brave, strong, proud, tough, and most importantly, loving. My hero, my dad. At the age of 47, my dad, a widower, decided to bring his family, uproot his life to the United States in order to provide us an opportunity to achieve the American dream. Over the last 46 years, he has raised us, provided us support, love, and everything that a family could need. And today he's celebrating his 94th birthday. And so, happy birthday, Dad. I love you, and to many more. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor a true leader, public servant, and a pillar of our community. City of Carlisle Police Chief Eric Frank, who's retiring after more than 42 years of service. He served as an EMT, a Carlisle police officer, and as the department's chief for the past 25 years. That's a quarter of a century of leadership and a lifetime of sacrifice for the people of Arkansas's 1st District. Chief Frank has been the backbone of public safety in Carlisle, as demonstrated by his leadership in recent years through the challenges of the pandemic and during devastating storms. In 2023, when severe weather took lives in Carlisle, he provided decisive leadership, coordinating with state agencies and always putting the safety of residents first. Whether launching drug take-back programs, advancing child safety, or handling day-to-day work, Chief Frank approached every duty with the same unwavering commitment. Chief Frank, on behalf of the grateful people of Arkansas's 1st District, thank you for your service, your integrity, and your dedication. You've served with distinction. I'm proud to be your congressman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Gary Smith, a visionary leader whose 50-year career at Pennsylvania's own Chester County Economic Development Council has shaped the economic growth and prosperity of southeastern Pennsylvania. A lifetime Chester County resident, Gary grew up on his family's farm in West Bradford Township, which he still owns today. He joined Chester County's Economic Development Council in 1976, and he became the CEO 2 years later. Under his leadership, the organization expanded its programs and grew into a regional economic development leader and superpower. And now, after 50 years, Gary is stepping down as that CEO, and he leaves behind an enduring legacy. Gary has led with unwavering commitment to our community, from small businesses to family farms to younger generations entering the workforce. In recognition of his contributions, he was recently inducted into the Chester County Hall of Fame, and he couldn't be more deserving of that. Gary, congratulations on this honor. Thank you for decades of service to Chester County and to our great Commonwealth. Your impact will doubtless be felt for generations to come. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to pay tribute to an honorable, patriotic, gregarious American who dedicated his life to building our nation and world into a more just, livable country and democratic world. This past weekend, former New Jersey Congressman Frank Guarini passed away at the ripe age of 101 years old, just 2 months shy of attaining his 102nd birthday. Frank was an American patriot, World War II decorated Pacific Navy veteran, successful lawyer, and business leader. His milestone life included service in this House from 1979 to 1993. Hailing from Jersey City, New Jersey, Frank, like his father before him, distinguished himself as an honorable, extraordinary citizen, a champion swimmer, and World War II Navy combat veteran with 3 battle stars of the Pacific campaign. He rose to the rank of lieutenant in the U.S. Navy. He served as a distinguished probing member of the Ways and Means Committee, specializing in international trade and fair taxation. Continuing to pursue business and philanthropic interests until his passing, he endowed his alma mater, Dartmouth College's School of International Relations, St. Peter's College, New York School of Law, as well as John Cabot University in Italy and the Italian-American Foundation, and countless and endless works of goodwill toward others. I send our heartfelt prayers and deepest condolences to his sister Caroline, nephew Peter, niece Carol, many cousins, countless friends, loved ones around the world, and his beloved Jersey City community to which he dedicated his being. May Frank's constructive, honorable life inspire future leaders in the generations to come. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a moment of silence in his memory. And Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very kindly. I rise to celebrate 2026 NBA champion Josh Hart. Josh just helped lead the New York Knicks to their first NBA championship since 1973. An outstanding shooting guard and rebounder. He's an essential force on the Knicks, and many say the beating heart of the team. Now, there might not be a lot of Knicks fans in Maryland, but there are a lot of Josh Hart fans. Josh's basketball career started in Montgomery County, Maryland at the great Wheaton High School and then at Sidwell Friends in Washington, D.C. He excelled off the court as a passionate student and an active citizen. He promised his dad that he'd become an Eagle Scout, so after a lot of hard work, he did Troop 1038 in Rockville proud by earning the Eagle Scout rank. I also want to recognize Josh's parents, my constituents, Moses and Pat, Josh's siblings, Moses, Joseph, and Amy, Josh's wife, Shannon, and their twin sons. From the Eagle Scouts to the NBA, Josh has made the 8th District of Maryland proud. We're happy for New York and the Knicks, but we send special appreciation to Josh Hart from his home in Maryland. Congratulations.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Washington seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the tremendous occasion that is happening in my district this weekend. A memorandum of understanding, the first of its kind, between the Suquamish tribe and the U.S. Navy has finally been reached after years of good faith negotiations. This MOU sets a new standard for how U.S. military collaborates with tribal governments to respect tribal sovereignty and to preserve treaty rights. The Suquamish tribe has stewarded the lands and waters of the Salish Sea, or the Puget Sound, since time immemorial, and have been gracious neighbors to the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard and the U.S. Navy's Intermediate Maintenance Facility in Bremerton. The shared waterway includes tribal fishing grounds and shellfish beds, and this MOU will compensate the tribal members for the access that will be impacted during the construction of the Navy's proposed multi-mission dry dock. The Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program and its M2D2 project is a once-in-a-century investment to modernize 4 aging naval shipyards into new modern facilities that will serve our nation into the future. In my district alone, there are 12 federally recognized tribes who often neighbor our 4 DoD installations, and this serves as a model not only for Washington State, but the nation. I commend the Navy and the Suquamish tribe for their years of leadership and perseverance in reaching this historic agreement. I yield.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to honor Daphne Muse, a daughter of Washington, D.C., who made Oakland, California, her home for more than 50 years. She recently transitioned at the age of 81. Daphne was a mother, a mentor, an intellectual, an avid disability rights advocate, a writer and keeper of Black letters. She helped to run the Drum and Spear bookstore here in Washington, D.C., a legendary store here in the Capitol. And for the crime of selling books to Black folks in the civil rights movement, J. Edgar Hoover's FBI placed her under surveillance. She answered her life's work by gathering more than 22,000 letters and papers documenting Black life across the diaspora. At Mills College, she served as a leader and she mentored countless young women and gave her heart to the education of girls and women. I was one of the beneficiaries of her love and her brilliance. Oakland, California raised a giant, Mr. Speaker. May her name be in remembrance always. And I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the progressive movement is winning across the country, from the heart of New York to Michigan to Maine. The people are saying no to foreign wars, and they're saying no to genocide in Gaza. They're saying no to the unfair and lopsided economy that has allowed a few people to hoard extreme wealth and power. And they're saying yes to Medicare for all, to unions for all, to child care for all, to making sure that we have a housing guarantee for kids by the time they're 35 if they work hard. Now, some of the oligarchs don't like it. Elon Musk has been threatening to sue me or jail me, but I'll tell you what, they should judge us by those who are attacking us. We will not be intimidated. We stand for transforming this country for the working class over the billionaire class. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and still I rise, and still I rise. Unbought, unbossed, unelected, liberated Democrat. And I rise today, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the fact that I have been censured by this House. Censured, but not silenced. And I rise today, Mr. Speaker, because the housing crisis that we confront has taken on a new dimension. I am in full support of the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, full support of it. Many others are. But I rise today to announce that this is now the Trump housing crisis. It is the Trump housing crisis, and I should like to present evidence to substantiate my claim. It's the Trump housing crisis because on yesterday, the president declined to sign the bicameral, the bill that was voted on in this House and passed, in the Senate and passed, bicameral bill. Rarely do we get such a thing, but this one also is bipartisan, has huge Republican support, huge Democratic support. Let me read from an official document. This is from congress.gov. The indication here is that this piece of legislation had 191 Democrats to vote for it, 166 Republicans to vote for it, total of 358 for the legislation. That is the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. In the United States Senate, it had 85 yeas, only 5 nays. In the United States Senate, overwhelming support. The kind of support that would cause people to come to the floor of the House of Representatives as they did. I was here, came to the floor of this House of Representatives, and many persons on both sides of the aisle talked about the collegiality, perhaps not using that exact word, but the collegiality. Talked about how this was one of the rare moments when we have received this bipartisan, bicameral support for a piece of legislation, a great piece of legislation, I might add. A piece of legislation that was a long time in the making. A piece of legislation that this House passed and the Senate passed, as I've indicated before, by large margins. But I heard persons stand here at this podium and at that podium and at the podium in the well and proclaim that this piece of legislation was indicative of what we can do when we work together. The symbiosis that was created by Democrats and Republicans working together. Everyone was in a great mood, a celebratory mood. Persons were ready to move on to the next phase. After all, you have to have the House, the Senate, to pass a piece of legislation. And there are many people who say that before you can get a House and a Senate to pass a bill, they first have to have the will. They demonstrated the will after having negotiated for some time. That was the first phase of it. The first phase of it included some persons who are of note and should be mentioned. The Honorable Maxine Waters should be mentioned. She and the Honorable Elizabeth Warren, the two of them, They worked together to bring this to fruition. They worked together after a chasm had erupted as it relates to the bill. There was a chasm that many thought would be impossible to scan, but I called them the W's. The W's, Waters, and the Honorable Maxine Waters, I always say that because I have such great respect for her, and the Honorable Elizabeth Warren, the Honorable Elizabeth Warren, I have great respect for her. They were able to expand this chasm and make this difference. I would also mention that in the Senate, it had bipartisan support because the majority leader and the leader of the Senate, the majority leader and the minority, they both signed off on it. This was something that took great work to accomplish. And I would also add this, it took people who were experienced. This is one of those times when experience with legislation made a difference. I'm not sure that a neophyte could pull off what they were able to accomplish. And I'm very proud to say that I support what they've done. I support the bill. So we were all set. Everybody was prepared for the signing ceremony. It was going to be a celebratory time. And everyone prepared to receive an indication that the president was going to sign it at the White House. I think everyone was. I was, surely, prepared for this. And the president, in his own way, indicated that no, it would not be signed at the White House. The president said that he would come to this Capitol and he would sign it here. And of course, the Speaker, in preparation for the president's arrival, decided to do all of the things to make sure that we had the proper pomp and circumstance available to the President of the United States. Well, everything was set. The flags were in place. The table was arranged. People were notified. And everyone was prepared for the signing of the legislation saving the president. The president sent a message indicating that he would not, N-O-T, would not sign this piece of legislation. The president indicated that he would not sign it and had some things to say about it that were not flattering. He diminished the magnitude of the legislation. He went on to indicate that this was not something that he thought was appropriate. I don't know what his rationale was. It never comes through clearly because the president contradicts himself in the sentence where he makes any given statement at any given time. So I have no ideas of what that was all about. But I do know this. When he decided not to sign the legislation, when he decided that he would literally allow it to just linger in limbo, I suppose, when he decided to do this, he then took on the housing crisis. The housing crisis is now that of the President of the United States. It belongs to the President of the United States. He decided that he would not sign legislation that is much needed in this country, legislation that can make a difference in the lives of people in the country, and he's putting petty politics above a piece of legislation that can make a profound difference. Petty politics above a profound difference that can be made by him, but only affixing his signature to a piece of historic legislation, landmark legislation in my world. Well, when he decided that he wouldn't do it, here's what he also decided. He decided that he was not going to concern himself with the many people who cannot afford a home right now. Many people cannot afford a home. Affordability is a problem. It is a crisis. The president is well aware of this. He either knows or should know that this is a part of the solution, this bill, and he's not given a clear rationale for why he wouldn't sign it, but he took on the notion that people who cannot acquire a home, that this is now a problem for him to have to resolve in some other way, I suppose. I doubt that he'll figure out a way to do it. But he's not supporting those people who are in need of a home. Those people who live in areas where the homes are being purchased by corporate America, not all of corporate America, but various companies that are in the business of purchasing homes and then leasing or renting these homes. He is now supportive of this, something that he said that he was antithetical to, that he was opposed to. But he's now supportive of this because he won't sign the bill that deals with this very issue, the issue of the homes that could go to first-time home buyers being purchased by corporations. And as a result, those homes are now being placed on the rental market. The United States would become a country where the American dream is the dream to rent a home if the president does not sign this bill. So he now has embraced these people who would prevent persons from acquiring a home by simply buying up the property and leasing it. He also has done something that I never thought I'd see him do because he's generally speaking supported the construction industry. He says he's a great person of knowledge when it comes to constructions and the whole notion that you're a great builder. He considers himself a great builder. Well, he now is at odds with the builders in this country. The builders in this country are ready to build more homes. This bill would allow them that opportunity because it eliminates a lot of the red tape. I've had the builders to come to me and tell me about the red tape that they encounter when they are attempting to build a home on a piece of property. There's red tape associated with the codes across the 50 states, and this red tape associated with these codes across the 50 states is something that they encounter that makes it difficult for them to move expeditiously and construct homes. Well, this piece of legislation deals with this notion that 50 states are going to have 50 different means of getting something done. And it incentivizes the states to allow these home builders to have the opportunity to do what they do best, and that is construct homes for persons to purchase, and some, of course, for rental purposes. But it would allow the construction process to move forward expeditiously. Not as fast as they might want it to move or I might want it to move, but faster than it is moving currently. This would be the case. But the president now is at odds with the builders. He's at odds with those who want to buy homes. He's at odds with those who would like to build homes because he won't sign the bill that will make it easier for the builders to do what they do and for persons who desire to purchase homes for the first time to have the opportunity to do so. The president is going to find himself helping persons who would like to avoid seeing this whole process develop because somehow they believe that if this process develops, it will somehow hurt them politically. I don't see that. But the president seems to be siding with them, and he is, in fact, not only siding with them, he's making it possible for the bill not to pass because not to become law because he won't sign the bill. He won't sign it into law. So he's siding with people who, for political reasons, simply believe that this bill is politically unacceptable for reasons that have not been explained. So, Mr. President, here's also something that's important for you to consider. If you pass the bill by virtue of signing it and placing it into law, you have an opportunity to vote on its final passage because you have a vote in this process. So if your vote is ratified by your signature, if you do this, then people will have more jobs. You will in fact help to increase the number of persons who are not only seeking jobs but are acquiring jobs. Those people will be able to get jobs. You can't build millions of homes and not have these contractors and builders acquire additional personnel to help facilitate the work that has to be done. So this will happen. We will have more people employed. You're going to help with the unemployment issue in the country if you sign the bill. By not signing the bill, you are, of course, continuing with the unemployment issue. In fact, you are facilitating the unemployment of Americans because they could have jobs, but for your failure to sign the bill. Your failure to sign the bill then would cause persons not to be able to sell some of the things that would be in a home if it is constructed. For example, you've built a home, you're going to have carpet in many of them. Well, the people who sell carpet, they will not have the opportunity to prosper even more because of these millions of homes. The people who will sell the washers and the dryers and the drapes, they will not have the opportunity to prosper as a result of your not signing the bill. And the people who build the homes will also make these homes a place such that persons will acquire equity for the future. These home builders are building places that allow equity to be acquired by the home purchasers. This equity is something that can be used for many reasons, many things. It can be used to help a child go to college. The equity can be used in an emergency, some family emergency. Your equity in a home can be there for you. But it can also be the means by which you can pass on wealth to the next generation. That wealth that you could pass on to the next generation is something that helps them get a start, a leg up in life, if you will. This won't happen if we don't sign the bill. And Mr. President, you can sign this bill and help those who would have the opportunity to acquire equity, help those who are in the marketplace selling the various pieces of paraphernalia, the various things that are necessary to have a home develop into the place that you consider livable, the washers, the dryers, all of these things. You're also going to prevent people from literally having the roof over their heads and a place that they can settle in and not find themselves moving about from one place to another, a place to call home. Also, if you would sign the bill, Mr. President, you will find that this will give the country the opportunity to move forward away from this housing crisis and do some of the other things that are very important for us in the country. There are things that can be done, but this bill itself was something that took up an inordinate amount of time. We would be free of having to deal with it, and we can deal with implementation. This bill also, Mr. President, would allow persons who suffer from natural disasters, their homes are damaged, the roofs are torn. I've seen it in many cases. When Katrina came through, I saw the damage that it did. I've seen the damage that Harvey did. This bill would help persons when they are confronting these natural disasters and they're suffering as a result of harm having been done to their property. This bill would help them because the bill has within it the Reforming Disaster Recovery Act, something that I'm proud to say I am a sponsor of. This bill has that act within it, and this act within it, this legislation within it, would allow persons to recover faster. The process that we have currently is one that has not been codified. After each natural disaster, we find ourselves having to borrow a term, reinvent the wheel. Reinvent the wheel. We find ourselves having to start all over again after each of these natural disasters. And we have them across the country. We have the weather on the coast, and then we have the tornadic activity, we have the fires. When we have these man-made, not man-made, some of them are, but we'll call them acts of God. Sometimes they're simply things that people don't perpetrate. They're things that the nature itself will visit upon people. And so as a result of these things happening and people suffering from them, this legislation will allow them to recover faster because there will be a codified process that allows money to be acquired faster. Money meaning the money that persons will need to restore their lives to some degree of normalcy. You don't have that currently. This bill provides that. It provides for a means by which money can be processed through the system. It can be acquired by simply following something prior to, a process in place prior to the disaster occurring, and helping people to understand how they can acquire the necessary help that they will need. This would be something that would be made known to states, made known to the persons who are in various municipalities who are in control. That will usually be your county judge in certain places, your mayors. But there would be legislation that they could look to get a better understanding of what the process would be like in the recovery phase after a natural disaster. So I'm very proud that this legislation is there. And by signing the bill, yes, Mr. President, you'd be signing a bill that has legislation in it that Al Green has sponsored. But you know what, Mr. President? You're big enough to do that. You can do it. I know it'd be hard for you, but give it a try. I'm going to be proud to say that you signed it, and that you ought to be proud to know that I voted for it. And this will be one of the few times that you and I will probably be on the same page, Mr. President. That in and of itself should be reason for you to sign the legislation so that we can both say that we did something together. Wouldn't that be wonderful, Mr. President? Al Green and the President of the United States of America working together. It can happen, Mr. President, but it's up to you, not to me. I've done my part. It's now time for you to do yours, and you can. You can. I know. Just think about it. It can happen. Continuing, though. Mr. President, finally, as I come to my closure here, I must tell you that you have a great responsibility. The framers of the Constitution, these were some brilliant people. They did prepare us for a time such as this and a president such as Trump. Mr. President, these were some brilliant people. They knew that we might encounter a president who would not want to sign a piece of historic legislation. So there is a means by which we can move forward, and that means is without your signature. That means is simply this. You don't sign it. Once it's delivered to you, once you receive it, once it's sent to you, then 10 days later, if you don't sign it, it becomes law. 10 days later, it becomes law, not counting Saturdays and Sundays. 10 days later, it'll become law. And then when it becomes law, Mr. President, you didn't sign it, so that gives you a way out. You didn't sign it, it became law, and you can go out and tell people how you were opposed to the many things that I've mentioned, how you were opposed to helping people who are renters acquire a place to call home, how you were opposed to helping the builders construct more homes so that people can have a place to call home. You can go out and talk about that in your very own way. So you don't have to sign it. But it does have to arrive at your, in your place, if you will, in your space. You have to receive it. It has to be sent to you. And if it is sent to you, then the 10 days will start from the day that it is forwarded to you. My hope is that it would be done if it hasn't been done, and that the 10 days would run. I know, Mr. President, that you enjoy having other people take responsibility for your inactions and your actions. So since you enjoy it very much, my fear is that you will encourage that it not be sent to you. You will push back on it being sent to you, so that later on you will be able to say, oh, I never got it, so I couldn't sign it. That would give you your way out. You would push back. Well, I would hope that that pushback won't be sufficient. And I would hope that you would receive it so that either you will sign it and move on, or it's not signed and it passes, or you can veto it. And if you veto it, I believe that with the number of votes that I've called to your attention for passage in the House and the Senate, that veto can be overridden. Again, you're off the hook. You're off the hook. But my fear is that knowing you, you're going to do everything that you can to avoid having that get to your desk so that you can then blame someone else for your inaction, which really would be your actions, because you would have rejected having it being sent to you in the first place. So I'll close with this. I'm proud to have been a person to vote for this piece of legislation. It is landmark. It's going to make a difference in the lives of people once it becomes law. And my hope is that it will become law expeditiously, because there are many aspects of it that will have to be activated, and it will take time for these things to be properly activated so that they become meaningful and can function. But I'm hoping that you'll sign it. But, Mr. President, if you don't sign it, here's what you're doing. You're providing another piece of ammunition. Another piece of ammunition for, excuse me just a moment while I exchange posters. Another piece of ammunition for the countdown to impeachment. Now, why would I say this? Because, Mr. President, you've angered a good many senators, a good many of them who might have considered other things will give some consideration to this word, impeachment. Impeachment starts in the House. It's the Senate that will vote to determine whether you are a person who should be actually convicted of the charge. The House acts as sort of a grand jury, not the same, but similar to. And you've caused a lot of people in the House, Mr. President, who are going to give consideration to this word. Now, you may not be impeached for this bill, but you're giving people reasons to consider your impeachment for legitimate reasons that already exist, by the way. For legitimate reasons, you should be impeached already. But you haven't been. The countdown is still on, and what you're doing is adding fuel to the fire of impeachment that may, at some point, become more than you can manage. I really do believe, Mr. President, that this act can help you by signing it, this bill, and it's going to hurt you immensely if you don't sign it. Not physically. Not physically. I don't want your FBI concluding that somehow I would cause you any harm. I would never want to see you harmed, and anybody that would want to see you harmed, I am absolutely opposed to whatever they might do. You deserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I can tell you this, you also deserve impeachment, and the countdown will continue. I trust that you will stall it and do something to benefit yourself by simply signing a piece of legislation that the American people want. And the American people want it to the extent that the builders, Mr. President, are going to contact you or some aspect of your administration about it. You're going to have citizens calling your office, calling the White House. You're going to have people writing you letters. You're going to have plenty of communication to contend with, because this piece of legislation is pervasive. It's huge. You're going to have people who have a vested interest in this legislation contacting somebody to let you know that you should sign this legislation. I rise, unbought, unbossed, unelected, liberated Democrat. I yield back.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging personalities towards the president and to direct their remarks to the chair. Under Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2025, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Sort of our weekly attempt to see if we can use math to annoy people. So let's actually have some fun here. I'm going to try 3 different things in this presentation. One, we're going to actually talk about the real driver of interest rates, housing affordability. Second thing, we're going to actually talk about sort of the cycle of fraud in so many of these government programs. Yesterday, my Joint Economic Committee, we did a high-level fraud in government-sponsored health care and Medicaid and other programs. Some wonderful data. And then the third thing, we're going to step on one of the third rails of politics, and we're going to tell the truth about demographics and the financing of Medicare and some of the things we're going to have to do to actually keep it stable. So, all right, let's actually start to tell the truth. How many of you have seen this chart? It has been one of my opening charts for year after year after year, trying to help everyone, staff, members of Congress, anyone that's crazy enough to watch this, the reality. You see the blue area here? That's functionally the only thing a member of Congress gets to vote on. You get to vote on defense and non-defense discretionary. Everything else is substantially on formula. And why this is so important is I keep trying to explain to people to understand. Social Security is the #1 spend. It's going to come in about $1,650 billion. Interest is the second biggest spend in our government, $1.2 trillion. Medicare, $1.1 trillion. Medicaid and Obamacare, ACA subsidies, is about $1 trillion. Defense is actually #5. So the thing that's in the Constitution is #5 in our spending stack, and we have a problem. If anyone was paying attention to the math there, if we're going to take in $5.25 trillion in tax receipts, did you notice by the time I got to the Medicaid, ACA subsidies, we were out of money? That means this year, my math is we're going to borrow about $2 to $2.3 trillion. Once again, think about this, Mr. Speaker. Last year, for every dollar we took in tax receipts, we spent $1.43. So let's actually talk about, remember, the Congress just passed a housing bill. I voted no on it because there's a number of things in there. Being a guy who actually has a background and actually even a degree in finance and housing, I don't believe it built another house. It created some programs, expanded this and that, but it didn't produce another house. It didn't do the things necessary. But one of the hardest parts of having an honest conversation around here, I'm going to show you, we've actually done some academic literature. So your 30-year mortgage today is going to be at 6.5%. Mr. Speaker, how'd you like it to be 5.5%? Do you know why it's a full point higher? U.S. government borrowing. When almost every single day we are borrowing about $7 billion, about $98,000 a second. You're competing with your own government. So here, we put together a couple helpful charts. So, housing affordability, sensitivity to interest rates. Think about this. If we were at 5.5%, and this is sort of using what would be a mean mortgage size in my community, Tempe, Scottsdale, your house payment would be $2,828. Add in that extra 1% of higher interest rates because we borrowed so damn much money. It's not $2,800, it's $3,100 a month. That premium that you're paying is an object of our borrowing. Did you hear a single discussion around this place saying, hey, if we're going to talk about housing affordability, maybe we could actually convince the debt markets we're going to stabilize our borrowing? Instead, every data point we have, it gets dramatically worse over the next 10 years. And it's the thing we're not allowed to tell the truth about, Mr. Speaker. We got a problem. Some of the math says next year we will have fewer under 18 than we had 20 years ago. But we'll have double the number 65 and up. I'll be one of them. And if you look around somewhere here, I think my 4-year-old is running around. Yes, my little boy turns 4 today. I'm 64 years old, and I have a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old and a wife my age because we're either really optimistic about the future or we did really bad retirement planning. But look, this is just math. And I've tried presenting this another time, and people, members of Congress, get mad at me because the hallways here are full of people who are showing up in our offices right now demanding more money. So let's actually have a little fun here. Household cost impacts of legislative fiscal policy, cumulative legislative contributions since 2015. Okay, what the hell does that mean? It basically is saying if you and I go back to 2015 and had 30-year mortgages, just the amount of borrowing the federal government does has made that 30-year mortgage $76,000 more over that 30-year time. That's what a single point of interest on an average loan in my part of the country. So what's the likelihood that we're going to convince our brothers and sisters here that we're going to borrow less money? And the frustrating thing is you and I will go home and we'll have a town hall or meetings and this and that, and the public will turn to us and say, it's all waste and fraud. I'm going to show you the slides. It's waste and fraud is a big deal, but it's a sliver. Our problem is our government functionally is an insurance company with an army. And we're terrified to tell the truth about it. So let's actually have some fun here. I'm going to hand that to you. So let's actually try to understand where the real mismanagement of spending is. You have more spending and leakage. What is leakage? I would argue leakage is what we in the Joint Economic Committee have identified over and over when we've written a piece of legislation poorly, or the lawyers or CMS or the Treasury have actually designed it where the smart lawyers out there find ways to exploit it. We've done entire presentations here on something called Medicare Part C, Medicare Advantage. 55% of our brothers and sisters on Medicare use this managed care model. There's something in there called risk scoring. There's something called a MedPAC report. It's about that thick. We write it, we get it every year. No one bothers to read it. And it basically says, hey, members of Congress, there's 150 billion a year in what we would define as leakage, where these insurance companies are able to come in and score grandma as being sicker, and therefore they get risk scoring, additional cash. Well, that extra spending means we have to raise our borrowing. You understand the problem? I just showed you our borrowing is raising your interest rates. We get over here and higher interest rates cause us a real problem because we make everything less affordable. And now interest is the second biggest expense in our government. And some of the models actually say in a decade, interest will be our number one expenditure. Look, when you have almost a $40 trillion debt, CBO's own report said in 9 budget years, and this is without the recent higher interest rates, without some of the additional supplementals and other borrowing and spending we're about to do, in 9 years, the deficit was going to be $3.1 trillion. 2.1 trillion of that was just interest. 1 trillion was actually the structural deficit. Yeah, hey, we're spending too much money. And over here was 2.1, it was just interest. And there it becomes the fragility. I love that fancy word. Fragility means small movements of interest going up. And it's a technical economic term, Mr. Speaker. It means we're screwed. The reality of it is there's this whole concept. I've done presentation after presentation after presentation about it. It's called interest rate fragility. The bond market is about to run this country. We aren't. And what are we going to do to convince that bond market? Because remember, we borrow money. The entire industrialized world is borrowing money. China's borrowing money. Japan's borrowing money. Now Germany's borrowing money. We are competing with everyone for what's left in the world's savings. And what happens in the industrialized world when people are getting older and they're moving into their retirement years and they're not saving in the same numbers? You start to have this stress, and this is Ray Dalio talks about this all the time, is the world's savings compared to the borrowing appetite. We got a mismatch, and that means interest rates go up. So let's actually start to dig through some of the perversities we identified in our joint economic hearing yesterday, talking about where's some of the leakage in programs we've designed. This isn't and some of it is. This isn't some foreign national sneak into the country, set up a scam. Some of this is, we wrote a law and we just did a really crappy job writing it. So, high New York caregiver pays. So, Medicare actually has a program where states can set up a program where it's visiting. So you can have your child, your cousin, your sister visit you on your Medicare or Medicaid. We actually have states like New York where the caregiver salaries, just these people who are coming and visiting you, are 50 grand. Well, what happens if I come to you and say, over the last 5 years, this program in New York City was the #1 job creator? And you start to actually look at what's happening by categories. So federal outlays by major categories. We're going to go bounce back and forth to try to make the point that it's how we've designed policy. You start to see 2011. You actually start to see where the leakage was. Here we are, 2026, and we're spending $7.449 billion. But do you understand the problem? Our tax receipts are only going to be about 5.5, if we're lucky. The rest of this ends up being borrowed. So let's actually do the board that actually annoys most people here when we get behind these microphones and say, it's waste and fraud. We can balance the budget if we just got rid of that. We can make a difference. But our best estimate, government fraud is almost 7% of the spending. Think of that. We calculated at 6.9% of our spending. Did I mention a little while ago that last year for every dollar we took in, we spent $1.43? This is a hell of a lot of money, but it's 7%. You're going to help me find the other, almost 35% we need, and that's actually structural. That's how we've designed programs. We've created incentives to basically exploit the system, not help people get healthier, not do the most efficient things, but the most profitable things. And then armies of lobbyists are all up and down these hallways to stop us from fixing this. Once again, Mr. Speaker, our best estimates, fraud in the federal government, if you do everything, it's under 7%. And here's some of the numbers that get really uncomfortable. Large share of Medicare spending on age 65. So this is the distribution, just so you understand. We calculate in over the next 6 years, Medicare spending will double. We'll basically go from $1 trillion last year to $2 trillion, okay, per year. And it's not a conspiracy, it's not Republican, it's not Democrat, just we got older and baby boomers are moving in to the higher utilization year of their health care benefits. So, but I've had this question over and over, well, what about all the people that aren't 65? Well, look, you have some of this population over here, renal failure, other certain categories where you're able to enroll in Medicare. But it's still a very small population. The majority, 82% of the population in Medicare, 65 and up, it's an earned benefit. But here is one of the punchlines. Mr. Speaker, anyone that's willing to listen, and this is just math, it's not personal, it's just math. What do you think we spend as a federal government? Remember, the Medicare Trust Fund only takes care of a portion of Medicare spending. The majority of Medicare spending actually comes out of the general fund and your co-pays. So let's take a look here. Here we are in 2026. Your federal government spends about $20,000 per enrollee in Medicare. In 9 budget years, it's $34,000 a year. Now what? There's 67 million baby boomers? Does anyone start to see a math problem? Medicare spending on 65 and up will accelerate, and this acceleration is just demographics. You know, as the baby boom population gets older, they're moving into higher utilization years. Okay. So we actually take a look at this. Think of this. In 2035, $2.13 trillion. So 9 budget years, over $2 trillion will just be the Medicare budget. Now you start to see when I talk about that the debt is substantially demographics. And let's see how many of these more we want to torture you with. Medicare spending will continue to expand. Look, this year it's 4%, a little over 4% of GDP. Nine budget years, it's over 5.6% of GDP. Do you remember how we in the House, the Budget Committee, the Treasury, we all talked about, we want to get down to 3% borrowing, 3% of the entire economy. Okay, that's great. If you add up everything, including the borrowing from the trust funds, this year, we're right now getting close to 7% of the entire economy is being borrowed. Anyone see the irony? In a few years, just Medicare is borrowing is taking 5.6% of the entire economy just for that one program. All right. Let's see what else we can do here that actually drives people a little bit insane. This is how bad we've been in our projections and not understanding. Now, understand, since 2011, think of the things that have happened. We had the financing of, the mortgage bubble from 2008. We had COVID. We've actually had these things hit. But debt held by the public per capita, and remember when we were in 2011, we were basically $33,000 per capita. Today we're over $92,000. And that's a 176% increase since 2011. This breaks my heart. When I got elected, I was part of the Tea Party wave. We basically were pledging fiscal sanity and fidelity to the U.S. Constitution. I'm not sure we're doing either of those these days. So, when I'm showing you those charts, I'm using the CBO projection. Remember, we're saying this year we were going to borrow about $1.7 trillion. My math is we're up to 2.3. Maybe I'm a bit pessimistic, but CBO's own calculation is in 2035, we're over $2.5 trillion in borrowing. And if you actually look at their February numbers, they had 3.1. Okay, let's see if we can make some of this make sense. And this is always difficult to talk about. And what I'm arguing for is we as policymakers, what can we adopt? What can we do? I've done entire presentations here week after week after week of here's ways we can get rid of duplicative MRIs, X-rays, ultrasounds, CT scans, and put those scans on your device so when you go to your next doctor, it's there, so we get rid of the duplicates. And we think that could be as much as $35 billion in a year, $350 billion over 10. And the lobbyists hate that idea because the excess spending. My reason for my rambling is there are solutions. You're not magically tomorrow going to say, hey, 40 years of falling fertility rates, 65 years of knowing we had baby boomers. The demographics aren't magically going to change. What are we about to do to grow productivity so fast that we can make up for a country that's now at zero population growth? And that census had a prediction that sometime in the next 5 years, we'll actually have a year or two with negative population growth. You're not used to hearing that about America. But take a look at this. Seniors per 100 working age adults. You go back, and I go back to 2011, I had 21 seniors for every 100. 2025, last year, where we had the data, it went from 21.9 to 32.2. Just trying to make the argument, Medicare, Social Security are today's worker pays for today's retiree. The total FICA tax, the total payroll tax doesn't cover the benefits going out the door. That's why they have to reach in and cash in their special T-bills, their special treasury bills. That trust fund in the Social Security Actuary report that came out a week ago basically says, a little over 6 years, it's gone. The trust fund is gone. Now, we can geek out for a while and explain we're already started borrowing that money internally because Treasury's already spent it, but Social Security holds those T-bills so they cash them in. Treasury has to go out and borrow the money to send them the money so they can send their checks out. But under current law, when that trust fund is gone in 6 years, 3 months, everyone over 65 getting a Social Security check under current law gets a 22 to 24% cut. We will double the poverty of seniors at that time. U.S. population age 65 and up. 2011, 41 million. 2026, so the year we're in right now, 63 million. It's just math. And what drives me insane around here, just makes me angry, it's math. Didn't we sort of know how old we were getting? Didn't we know about baby boomers? In God, heaven, in the early 80s, I remember sitting in a statistics class, and the professor at that time, she was talking about this, and that's 40 years ago. Forgive me, Matthew. Daddy. And here's one of the toughest things. Population of young people in decline as a population of 65 increases. For those of you who are uncomfortable with the discussions I've had on this floor of legalizing technology that could disrupt the price of healthcare, of moving to a talent-based immigration system instead of the migration of large populations of poverty, of designing systems of cures. See if I can make this make sense. So much of our spending around here is to maintain misery. I would argue the most moral thing we can do, particularly in healthcare, is the elimination of a disease, moving towards a cure. Give you the classic example, 15 years ago, hepatitis C. We had hospitals all around the country getting ready to put up liver transplant centers. And then a drug comes along. It was expensive. What is it, Sovaldi? And then a competitor right after that. Crashed the price. And now those liver transplant centers are not needed. Would you believe, Mr. Speaker, we had lobbyists here trying to slow down access to the drug so those folks who had built the liver transplant centers could actually amortize their costs. If this is our demographics, are we going to design policies where we can actually disrupt the cost of delivering health care? And yet, every time I talk about this, I realize we're not only talking about disrupting bureaucracies, we're talking about disrupting business models, particularly in healthcare. Cures are moral, and they're really amazing economics. A while back, I did a series of presentations on something we're not supposed to talk about, but we really should, that 47% of U.S. healthcare was somehow related to obesity. Okay, think about what I just said. 47% of U.S. healthcare was related to obesity. Maybe it would be moral and really good economics and just compassionate saying, what are we doing in nutrition support? What are we doing in gamification of helping people eat healthier, deal with multi-chronic conditions? What are we doing in access to new drug categories, other things that could help our brothers and sisters get healthier, and the economic value of that turns out being the single biggest thing you could do to reduce U.S. borrowing. Turns out, Mr. Speaker, those folks who talk about MAHA and these things, they're actually partially exactly correct. Health. If the biggest growth of our spending is within those healthcare categories, what can we do to lower the price of healthcare? Is it rationing or working for using technology and other things to help our brothers and sisters get healthier? All right, I'm going to see if I have one last board here. All right, apparently we didn't print it. Mr. Speaker, we basically just ran through sort of three categories. U.S. debt is raising the cost for all of you. You are paying higher interest rates on your credit card and your mortgage, your car loan, because the insatiable appetite of the federal government. And let's be honest, the insatiable appetite of borrowing from the federal government is because our public actually demands it. They want things. They don't want to be told no. Number two, we talked about waste and fraud and how real it is, but it's structural in so many of our programs, and it's a profit model for many of those who use these programs. But even then, it's still under 7%. And third thing, the reality of what we are as a country. It's demographics. We have a lack of young people. We're getting older. We have a whole bunch of benefits that we are obligated to because we made promises. We made a societal contract. I can give you a path that we keep our promises, Mr. Speaker, but every day we refuse to deal with the reality of the math. It makes it that much harder to protect the future. And the little boy that's sitting behind me, he turned 4 years old today. The math says if you use the 6% generational discount rate, which is reasonable in today's world, we need 104% of his lifetime earnings just to pay the pensions of the federal government. Is this really what we decided we're going to do to our kids and our grandkids? Because it's what we've done. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Oh, does the gentleman have a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand adjourned.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until noon on Monday next for morning hour debate.